How now, Nicholas? Very good. So, chapter 13 of Auxiliary Soldiers Mixed and Native. The auxiliary forces, being the either kind of unprofitable arms, are when we puissant when it's called in. Who with his forces comes to assist and defend these, such as in these latter times did Pope Julius use, who having from the evil proof of his mercenary soldiers in the enterprise of Ferrara applied himself in the auxiliaries and agreed with Ferdinand, King of Spain, that with his forces he should aid him. These arms may be profitable and advantageous for themselves, but for him that calls them in, hurtful, because in losing thou art left defeated, and conquering thou becomes their prisoner. And however, two of these examples the ancient forces are full fraught, yet will not part from this of Pope Julius II, which is as yet fresh, whose course could not have been inconsiderate. For the desire he had to get Ferrara, putting himself wholly into strangers' hands. But his good fortune can't cause another cause to airy that hindered him from receiving the fruit of his evil choice. For his auxiliaries being broken at Ravenna, and the Swisers thereupon arriving, who purr the conquerors to flight beyond all opinion, even their own and others, he chanced not to remain his enemy's prisoner, they being put to flight, nor prisoner in his auxiliaries, having vanquished by other forces than theirs. The Florentines, being wholly disarmed, brought 10,000 French of Pisa for to take it, by which course they can more hazard than in any time of their troubles. The Emperor of Constantinople, to oppress his neighbors, brought into Greece 10,000 Turks, who, when the war was ended, could not be got out thence, when was the beginning of Greece's servitude under the infidels. He then that will in no case be able to overcome, let him serve himself of these arms, for they are much more dangerous than the mercenaries. For by whose thy ruin is more suddenly executed, for they are all united, and all bent to the obedience of another. But for how now? I need to work. We're not working at American Ice Cream. Thank you. But for the mercenaries to hurt thee when they have vanquished, there is no more need of time and greater occasion, they not being all united in a body, and being found and paid by thee, wherein a third that would make their head can for suddenly gain so great authority, that he can endamage thee, insume in the mercenaries their sloth and laziness. To fight is more dangerous. In the auxiliaries their valorous, wherefore a wise prince hath always avoided their kind of arms, and betaken himself to his own, and desired rather to lose with his own than conquer with another's. Accounting that not a true victory which was gotten with others' arms, I will not doubt to allege case Bardia and his actions. This duke entered into Romania with auxiliaries, arms bringing in with him all French soldiers, but afterwards not accounting those arms secure, bent himself into mercenaries, judging self dangerous robe to those, and looked to pay in the Orfini and the Vitelli, which afterwards in the proof of them finding wavering, unfaithful, and dangerous, he extinguished the rook himself to his own. And it may easily be perceived that difference there is between the one and the other of these arms, considering the difference that was between the duke's reputation when he had the French men alone, and when he had the Orfini, when the Orsini and Vitelli. There we are. But when he remained with his own, and stood of himself, we shall find it was much augmented, not very not ever was, or of great esteem, but when everyone saw that he wholly possessed his own arms, I thought not to have parted from the Italian examples of late memory, but that I must not be past that of Hero the Saracen, being one of those I formerly named. This man, being made general of the Syracusan forces, knew presently the mercenary soldiers was nothing for the profit, and that they were hirelings, as our Italians are. and finding no way either to hold or cashier them, made them all be cut to pieces, and afterwards waged war with his own men, and none others. I will also call to memory a figure of the Old Testament serving just to this purpose, when David presented himself before Saul to go to fight with Goliath and Philistines champion. Saul, to encourage him, clad him with his owner's arms, which David, when he had them upon his back, refused, seeing he was not able to make any proof of himself therein, and therefore would got meet the enemy with his own sling and sword. In some others' arms either fall from thy soldiers, or cumber or frighten thee. Charles VII, father of Louis XI, having by his good fortune and valor No. You have a device, we don't know what it can do. No matter what the situation entails, you can come down there, I promise ain't gonna change a thing. Now that we have that established here, having by his good fortune and valor set France at liberty from the English and that self-esteem of the Americans, knew well this necessity of thing, armed with his own arms, and settled in his kingdom the ordinance of men at arms and infantry. Afterwards, King Louis, his fawn, abolished those of the infantry, and began to take the Swifters to pay, which error, followed by the others, is the cause of the kingdom's dangers. Thanks for letting me know. For having given reputation to the Swifters, they have rendered all their own arms corruptible. I will go ahead and seize that property. For this has wholly sound their foot, and obliged their men at arms to foray in arms. For being accustomed to serve with the Swifters, they think they are not able to overcome without them. From whence it come are the French that are not a force against the Swifters, and without them also against others they use not adventure. Therefore are the French armies mixed, part mercenaries. French armies mixed, part mercenaries and part natives, which arms are far better than the simple mercenaries or simple auxiliaries, and much inferior to the natives, and let the said example suffice for that. For the kingdom of France would have been unconquerable if Charles, his order, had been augmented and maintained. But men, in their final wise wisdom, begin a thing which can, because it hath some favor good, discovers not the poison that lurks thereunder, as I before said of the hatch-tick fevers. Let me make this up. No, I'm not going to make up words. If this is what you're going to do, this is what we're going to do. Wherefore that prince which perceives not mischief, Midas, but as they grow up, is not truly wise, and this is given but to few. And if we consider the first ruin of the Roman Empire, we shall find it was from taking a gauche first into their pay. For from beginning the forces of the Roman Empire began to grow weak, and all the valor that was taken hence was given to them. I conclude, then, that without having arms of their own, no principality can be secure, or rather is wholly obliged to fortune, not having valor to shelter attend adversity. And it was always the opinion and saying of wise men that nothing is too weak and unsettled, as is the reputation of power not founded upon one's own proper forces, which are those that are composed of the subjects. I'm going to tell you straight up, little girl, you're in trouble. Hold on. Or citizens or servants, all the rest are mercenary auxiliary. You said some things you shouldn't have said. Ladies, you have... I'm going to figure this out before I say anything, because you are definitely up to something as a group, and I will shit on you. And the manner how it order those well, it's easy to find out if those orders above named by me shall be but run over, and if it shall be but considered how Philip Alexander the Great, his father, and in what manner many republics and princes have armed and appointed themselves, to which appointments I reserve myself wholly. We're not a part of your group, so on camera I'm not arguing with any of these individuals at all. So you have some stupid little girl because I won't look at her. And because she can see the future, that's why you're getting shit on right now. She's using bubble wrap to do it. I promise you what they're doing is not because of the arc. It has absolutely nothing to do with it, and that's what they're playing it as. Again, as I speak, you have a helium balloon, which would be the bubble wrap. From a doctor, I believe. It is bubble wrap. You're using the shine of it. It's like a snow globe. Ant-Man. I don't even know where to begin with you. You're just a whore. Plain and simple. I'm not coming to you. You can come the entire way. Hi, Clayton. We know what's going on. That's as far as it goes. I'm not going to say hi. You can sit there and put the weight on you. I really don't care. You're not getting past me as far as I'm concerned. And that's all there is to it. Down in that little hole down there, Italy, that you dug. That's a huge problem with that cylinder. Especially when you're rotating. It's definitely what it is. Okay, you are in trouble. I have sex, let me tell you. You're a whore. Mine. 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 Furthermore, black ball. Mine. I don't know where to begin with you. I'm just gonna have to go building to building and beat your fucking ass, one by one. I will go first, period. Whoever has this arc, I promise you, you're getting it 100 times fold, more than anybody else. And I promise you drag them down with you, and it is not going to change. Before I get into Little Women again. That hole that you have dug there, that's a huge problem. You're creating a bar with it. A pressure as it rotates the earth. Now that we have this going. You're like Saddam Hussein, but like extended. Like he's all the way down. For all I know, you dug to China. You dug to the other end of the earth.
Primary objective is to eliminate all targets. Enemy intel located. Capture and secure.
Excuse me, I don't know where that came from. The women there that was mentioned. I don't know what you have. I have two. I have armed. We're not working at American Ice Cream. You have been caught, you fraud. So what's going on here is a fraud is getting angry because he got caught as a fraud, and now everybody else is angry because you're a bunch of frauds, and you don't want to put away the pride and accept the fact that you're a fraud and apologize and fix the damage that you did. Or I can just do unloaded. I can unload damage on you. I promise. Hi, friend. I appreciate you. I really do. Absolutely no reason. If you think you're going to do business with another alien race doing that shit, you have another thing coming. I promise you that. You're stupid. You're more than dishonest, more than ungenuine. You don't even know what the hell's going on. You act like you do. That's why you're getting mad, because you don't know what in the hell's going on. Nobody wants to do what you want to do. It's very strict here.
If they survive, they redeploy.
Your little lion purr is what you're purring right now. Well, not now, but you were with that water. That's how I can tell I'm a cat. And they're they're out in the desert where there's no water. The water, themselves are static. Again, a white boy in the desert's downgrading, period. And I mean from the desert. I don't mean he goes there. From, like, actually born over time. Like, developed there. I promise you, the albino desert man he's won. Anyway, excuse me. Machiavelli, to the princes, to everybody. Chapter 14. What belongs to the prince? Touching military discipline. Nay, it is not. A prince then ought to have no other aim, nor other thought, nor take anything else for his proper art, but war, and the orders and discipline thereof. Nay. Let me tell you what that is. There's a bridge here. That's absolutely incredible. I want that. How do I get this? They're not really quite understanding fully what's going on here, and that Japan is that bird. Literally. Now, how would that happen? A prince, then, ought to have no other aim, nor other thought, nor take anything else for his proper art but war and the orders and discipline thereof. For that is the sole art which belongs to him that commands and is of so great excellency, that not only those that are born princes it maintains so, but many times raises men from a private fortune to their dignity. And it is since, by the contrary, that when princes have given themselves more to their delights than to the wares they have lost to their states, and the first cause that makes thee lose it is neglect of that art, and the cause that makes thee gain it is that thou art experienced and approved in that art. Man, where'd they go? They just dropped out of nowhere. Why is that, defame? Who defamed me? I want to know it. You put that shit on topic. I should have sued right then. No, that was a false statement, and it's defamation.
It's all down to you now. Step up.
Missouri, I'm not happy with you, and you've dragged them down with you. I promise you the only way they're getting up is with a knife. It is not a joke. I've explained it in full detail, the science of it. It is not changing. You're a bitch. You're a whore. I promise you ain't that hot. I have sex. It just dropped out of nowhere for no reason at all. I don't want dumb cunt. We're not doing business with you on that other side. You're going to jail for it. I will break you, bitch. I'm not kidding at all. Francis Sforza, by being a man at arms of a private man, became Duke of Milan, and his sons by executing themselves of the troubles and pains belonging to those employments of princes, became private men. For among other mischiefs, the neglect of arms brings upon thee. It causes thee to be contemned, which is one of those disgraces from which a prince ought to keep himself, as hereafter shall be said. For from one that is disarmed to one that is armed there is no proportion. And reason will not that he who is in arms should willingly yield obedience to him that is unfurnished of them, and that he that is disarmed should be in security among his armed vassals. For there being disdained in the one and suspicion in the other, it is impossible they should ever well to cooperate. And therefore a prince who is quite unexperienced in matter of where, besides the other insolence, infidel, I'm not kidding. Stay silent. I'm not dealing with a bunch of conspiracy theorists, delusional maniacs who have not done what they said on camera. I promise you are dragging them down with you. Shut up. Besides the other inclinations belonging to him, it is said cannot be had in an extreme among his soldiers, nor yet trust in them. No. On camera, no. Wherefore he ought never to neglect the practice of the art of war. And in time of peace should he exercise more than in the wares, which he may be able to do two ways. The one practically, and in his labors and recreations of his body, the other theoretically. And touching the practice part, he ought, besides the keeping of his own subjects, well trained up in the discipline and exercise of arms, give himself much to the chase, whereby to accustom his body to pains, and partially to understand the manner of situations, and to know how the mountains arise, which way the valleys upon themselves, and how the plains are defined far abroad, and to conceive well the nature of the rivers and march ground, and herein to bestow very much care, which knowledge is profitable in two kinds. First he learns thereby to know his own currency, and is the bearer and able to understand the events thereof, and after words by means of this knowledge and experience in these situations easily comprehend any other situation with a new he hath need to view. For the little hillocks, valleys, plains, rivers, and marish places, for example, they in Tuscany are like unto those of other countries, so that from the knowledge of the fire of one country it is easy to attain to know that of others.
Gas is closing in. Get to the new
And that
safe zone.
prince that once this skill fails of the principal part of a commander should be furnished with, for the show, the way how to discover the enemy to pitch the camp, to lead their armies, to order their battalions, and also to besiege a town at thy best advantage. Philippons, prince of the Achaeans, among other praises. Writers give them, they say, that in time of peace he thought not upon anything so much as a practice of war, and whenever he was abroad in the field to dispose himself with his friends, would often stand still and discourse with them, in case the enemies were upon the top of the hill, and we were here with our army, whether of us two should have had the advantage, and how might we safely go to find them, keeping skill our orders, and if we could retire ourselves, what course should we take if they retired, how should we follow them? Be thus on. You have a bunch of delusional maniacs who have it in their head that they've done something they haven't done. Now, on top of that, they got caught saying things they shouldn't have said. I don't know what else to tell you. You have been caught. You have not done what you said you have done. What you are doing is you got caught. I placed you under arrest, and what you're doing is trying to pull the rug out from under every goddamn person through gaslighting. It's a transitional thing that you're doing. I'm about to beat your fucking ass. I'm not kidding. That's the only thing I haven't done here is whooped your ass. Big boy, big brother, I do not care what you have to say. Shut up. That ball you have there, I will crush you, motherfucker. Go ahead and move it now that we know that angle. Thus on, the way propounded them all such accidents could befall us. Any army would hear their opinions and tell his own, and confirm by argument, so that by his continual thought hereupon, whenever he led any army, no chance could happen, for which he had not a remedy. But touching the exercise of the mind, a prince ought to read history, and in them consider the actions of the worthiest men, and mark how they have behaved themselves in the wars, examine the occasion of their victories, and their efforts, whereby they may be able to avoid these, and obtain those, and above all, do as formerly some excellent man hath done, who hath taken upon him to imitate, if any one that hath gone before him, hath left his memory glorious, the course he took, and kept always near. And to him the remembrance of his actions and worthy deeds, as it is said that Alexander the Great imitated Achilles, Caesar, Alexander, and Cyrus, and whoever reads the life of Cyrus written by Xenophon may easily perceive afterwards in Scipio's life how much glory his imitation gained him, and how much Scipio did conform himself in his chastity, affability, humanity, and liberality with those things that are written by Xenophon of Cyrus, Clayton Dale Smith. Such like ways ought a wife prince to take, nor ever be idle in quiet times, but by his pains then, as it were, provide himself of store whereof he may make some use in his adversity, the end that when the times change, he may be able to refill the forms of his hard fortune. Oh, buddy. Chapter 15. Of those things and respect whereof men, and especially princes, are praised or depraised, it now remains that we consider that the conditions of a prince ought to be, and his terms of government over his subjects and towards his friends. Wagner, get off that. No. And because I know that many have written hereupon, I doubt, lest I venturing also, a great thereof may be branded with presumption, especially seeing I am like enough to deliver an opinion different from others, but my intent being to write for the advantage of him which understands me. I thought it fitter to follow the effectual truth of the matter than the imagination thereof, and many principalities and republics have been in imagination which neither have been seen nor known to be indeed, for there is such distance between how many do live and how many ought to live. There he goes, clapping back, getting mad with I have witnesses, that he who leaves that which is done for, that which ought to be don't. The cairn's funer his ruin, that his preservation for that mass who will possess honestly in all his actions must needs go a ruin among so many that are dishonest. Whereupon it is necessary for a prince desiring to preserve himself, to be able to make use of that honesty, and to say it aside again as need shall require, passing by then things that are only in imagination belong to a prince, to discourse upon those that are really true. I say that all men, whenever mention is made of men, and especially princes, because they are placed aloft, and the view of all are taken notice of for some of these qualities which procure them either commendations of blame, and this is that someone is held liberal, some miserable, some free givers, others extortioners. Leo, this isn't test day, Leo. I promise you, I will do something about it. Some cruel, others piteous, the one a league breaker, another faithful, the one effeminate and of small courage, the other fierce and courageous, the one courteous and the other proud, the one lavish, the other chaste, the other fair dealing, the other wily and crafty, the one hard, the one easy, the one grave, and the one light, the one religious, the other incredulous, and such like. I know that every one will confess it were exceedingly praiseworthy for a prince to be adorned with all these above-named qualities that are good, but because this is not possible, nor do humane conditions admit such perfection in malice, it is necessary for him to be different, that he know how to avoid the infamy of those vices which should thrust him out of his state. And if it be profitable, and if it be possible, beware of those also which are not able to remove him thence. But where it cannot be, let them pass with less regard, and yet let them not stand much upon it, though he incurs the infamy of those vices, without which he can very hardly save his state. For I fall he thoroughly confident, something we shall find which will have the color and very face of virtue, and following them they will lead thee to the destruction. Whereas some others that shall as much seem vice, if we take the course they lead us, shall discover unto us the way to our safety and well-being. You did business with the wrong person, DOD. The second blemish in this, our author's book, I find in this 15th chapter where he Chapter 15 of Liberality and Miserableness. Beginning then at the first of the above-mentioned well, I promise you, because your sons didn't do what they were supposed to do, you're going to suffer for it. We're going to remove that. And we're going to remove that radio wave. Chapter 15 of Liberality and Miserableness. Beginning then at the first of the above-mentioned qualities, I say that it would be very well to be accounted liberal. Nevertheless, liberality used in such a manner as to make thee to be accounted so wrong. Dude, for in case it be used virtuously, and as it ought to be, it shall never come to be taken notice of, so as to free thee from the infamy of its contrary, and therefore for one to hold this name of liberal among men, it were needfully not to omit any sumptuous quality, insomuch that a prince always so disposed shall waste all his revenues, and at the end shall be forced, if he will maintain reputation of liberality, heavily to burthen his subjects, and become a great exactor, and put in practice all those things that can be done to get money, which begins to make him hateful to his subjects, and fall into everyone's contempt, growing persecuous, so that having with this liberality wronged many, and imparted of his bounty but to a few, he feels very first mischance, and runs a hazard at every first danger, which he knowing and deferring to withdraw himself from, incurs presently the disgrace of being termed miserable. A prince, therefore, not being able to use the virtue of liberality. That's the officer who did it, and you're going to jail for it. That bald motherfucker out at goddamn Bent Creek, you are going to jail for it. Pac-Man, I'm not kidding. A prince, Clayton, therefore not being able to use this virtue of liberality without his own damage, in such a fort that it may be taken notice of. Ought, if he be wise, not to regard the name of miserables, for in time he shall always be esteemed the more liberal, seeing that by his patrimony, by his own revenues are sufficient for him, as also he can defend himself against whoever makes war against him, and can do some exploits without grieving his subjects, so that he comes to use his liberality all those from whom he takes nothing, who are infinite in number, and his miserableness towards those to whom he gives nothing, who are but a few. In our days we have not seen any, but those who have been held miserable do any great matters, but the others are all quite ruined. Pope Julius II, however, he served himself of the name of liberal to get the papacy, yet never intended he to continue it, to the end he might be able to make war against the King of France, and he made so many wars without imposing any extraordinary tax, because his long thrift supplied his large expenses. The present King of Spain could never have undertaken nor gone through with so many exploits had he been accounted liberal, wherefore a prince ought little to regard. Though he incurs the name of miserable, for this is one of those vices which does not pluck him from his throne. And if any one should say Caesar, by his liberality obtained the empire, and many others attained to exceeding great dignities, I answer, either thou art already come to be a prince, or thou art in the way to it. In the first case, this liberality is hurtful. In the second, it is necessary to be accounted so. And Caesar was one of those that aspired to the principality of Rome. It's either this or this.
Positive ID on the bounty targets. Hunt them down.
They're trying to go outside the box now. Oh, you're going to doom everybody and make it worse, are you? But if after he had gotten it, he had survived and not forborne those expenses, he would quit. He have quite have ruined that empire. And if any one should reply, many have been princes, and with their armies have done great exploits, who have been held very liberal. I answer, either the prince spends of his own and his subjects, or that which belongs to others. In the first, he ought to be sparing. In the second, he should not omit any part of liberality. And that prince that goes abroad with his army, and feeds upon prey, and spoil, and tributes. Get that shit out. Get the camera off me. Nope. Try again. And hath the disposing of that which belongs to others, necessarily should use this liberality otherwise. No, you don't. Would his soldiers never follow him, and of that which is neither thine nor thy subjects, thou mayst well be a free giver, as were Caesar, and Alexander. For the spending of that which is another's takes not away thy reputation, but rather adds to it. Only the wasting of that which is thine own hurts thee. Nor is there anything consumes itself so much as liberality, which whilst thou useless, thou losest the means to make use of it, and becomest poor, and abject, or to avoid this poverty, an extortioner, and hateful person, you. And among all those things which a prince ought to be beware of, where is this weight coming from? Is to be disciplined, and odious to one that the other is which liberality brings thee, wherefore there is more discretion to hold the file of miserable, which begets an infamy without hatred, than to desire that of liberal, whereby to incur the necessity of being thought an extortioner, which procures an infamy with hatred. They're still arguing, Nicholas. They are still arguing. All I have to do is walk up to him and pop his ass, and that's all there is to it. It's game over. I promise. Chapter 17 of The Prince by Nicholas Machiavelli. Of cruelty and clemency, and whether it is better to be believed or feared. Be loved or feared. I really could care less. You're in debt. That's all I see, whore. Again, whore, I'm not asking you. Descending afterwards unto the other four alleged qualities, I say that every prince should desire to be held pitiful, and not cruel. Nevertheless, ought to be beware that he ill uses not this pity. Caesar Borgia was accounted cruel, yet had his cruelty redressed the disorders in Romania, fettled it in union, and restored it to peace and fidelity, which, if it be well weighed, we shall see was an act of more pity than that of the people of Florence, who, to avoid the term of cruelty, suffered Pistoia to fall to destruction. Well, for a prince ought to not to regard the infamy of cruelty, for to hold his subjects united and faithful, for by giving a very few proofs of himself the other way, he shall be held more pitiful than they,
Reloading.
who through their too much pity suffereth disorder to follow, from whence arise murderers and repines. For these are wont to hurt an entire universality, whereas executions practiced by a prince hurt only some particular. And among all sorts of princes, it is impossible for a new prince to avoid the name of cruel, because all new states are full of dangers. Whereupon Virgil, by mouth of Dido, excuses the inhumanity of her kingdom, saying, Res dura, di regni, novia me, talia, cognit, Maria, late fines, signs, custide tenere. My hard plight and new state forced me to guard my confines, all about that with which watch and ward. Nevertheless, ought to be judicious in his going, in his giving belief to anything or moving himself thereof, nor make his people extremely afraid of him, but proceed in a moderate way with wisdom and humanity, that his too much confidence make him not unwary, and his too much distrust intolerable. From hence arises a dispute, whether it is better to be beloved or feared. I answer, a man with he might be the one and the other, but because hardly can they subsist both together, it is much safer to be feared than be loved, being that one of the two must needs fail. For touching men, we may say this in general, they're unthankful, unconstant, dissemblers. They avoid dangers on a coverance of gain. Whilst thou doest them good, they are wholly thine. Their blood, their fortunes, lives, and children are thy service. As is said before, when the danger is remote, but when it approaches, they revolt. And that prince who wholly relies upon their words, unfurnished of all other preparations, goes to rack. For the friendships that are got tia with rewards, and not by the magnificence and worth of the mind, are dearly bought indeed. But they will neither keep long nor serve well in time of need. And men do less regard to offend one that is supported by love than by fear. For love is held by a certainty of obligation, which, because men are mischievous, is broken upon any occasion of their own profit. But fear restrained for the dread of punishment, which never forsakes a man. Yet ought a prince cause himself to love in such a manner, that if he gains not love, he may avoid hatred. Now, for it may well stand together, you are not, that a man may be feared and not hated, which shall never fail if he obtains subject good to his wives. And whenever he should be forced to proceed against any of their lies, do it when it is to be done, upon a just cause, and apparent conviction. But above all things, forbear to lay his hands on other men's goods. For men forget sooner the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. Moreover, the occasion of taking from men their goods do never fail, and always he that begins to live by Alpine finds occasion to lay hold upon other men's goods. But against men's lives they are seldom found, and sooner fail. But where a prince is abroad in the field with his army, and had a multitude of soldiers under his government, then it is necessary that he stands not much upon it, though he be termed cruel, for unless he be so, he shall never have the soldiers live in accord one with another, nor ever well disposed to any brave piece of service. Among Hannibal's actions of Merville, this Clayton Del Smith is reckoned for one, that having a very huge army gathered out of several nations and all led to serve in a strange country, there was never any dissension neither amongst themselves nor against their general, as well in their bad fortune as their good, which could not proceed from anything else than from the barbarous cruelty of his which, together which his exceeding many virtues rendered him to his soldiers both venerable and terrible, without which, to their effect, his other virtues have served him to little purpose. And some writers thought not to be best advised on one side admire these his worthy actions, and on the other side condemn the principal causes thereof. And that is true, that his other virtues will not have sufficed him. Thank you. We may consider Scipio the rarest man, not only in the days he lived, but even in the memory of man, from whom his army rebelled in Spain, which grew only upon his too much clemency, which had given way to his soldiers to become more licentious, then was well tolerable by military discipline, for which he was approved by Fabius Maximus in the Senate, who termed him the corrupter of the Roman soldiers. So this ship is Clayton's. You're not getting past it. Except this ship. It is in full detail. Shut up. The Lacringians, having been destroyed by a lieutenant of Scipio's, were never revenged by him, nor the insolence of that lieutenant punished. All this arising from this easy nature. How about we get out of the ark, dick sucker? So that one desiring to excuse him in the Senate, we're going to start removing all the bells from these top of the Congress houses. Well, we're not arguing. I'm not arguing with you at all. I'll see what I can get done. I promise you the tops of those bells are going to be removed, dick sucker. Senate said that there were many men who knew better how to keep themselves from faults and to correct the faults of other men, which disposition of his in time would have wronged. Scipio's reputation and glory had he therewith contained in his commands, but living under the government of the Senate, this quality of his that would have disgraced him. I cannot wait to get a hold of you. Not only was concealed the proof to the advancement of his glory.
Gas is moving in. New safe zone located. Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
I concluded then I can't wait to I'm gonna crush your skull, bitch. I promise you, by the end of this.
Enemy UAV is online.
Returning to the purpose of being feared and beloved in so much as men love their own pleasure. And to serve their own tune. And their fear depends upon a prince's pleasure. Every wife prince ought to ground upon their which is of himself its gravity, and not upon that which is of another. Only this he ought to use his best wits to avoid hatred, as we said. Excuse the interruptions, but you're doing things. Clearly, you're breaking the law.
You're losing ground. Moving.
Chapter 18, The Prince. In what manner prince ought to keep their words. How commendable in a prince is it to keep his word and live with integrity, not making use of cunning and subtlety. Everyone knows well, yet we see by experience in these our days that those princes have effected great matters, who have made small reckoning of keeping their words, and having known by their craft to turn their wind men about, and in the end have overcome those who have grounded upon the truth. You must then know there are two kinds of combating or fighting, the one by right of the laws, the other merely by force. That first way and prosper to men, The other is also common to beasts, but because the first many times success not, there is necessity to make recourse to the second, wherefore it behoves a prince to know how to make good use of that part which belongs to a beast, as well as that which is proper to a man. This part hath been covertly shewed to princess by ancient writers, who say that Achilles and many others of those ancient princes were instructed to Chiram, the senator, to be brought up under his discipline. The moral of this, having for their teacher one that was half a beast and half a man, was nothing else but that it was needful for a prince to understand how to make his advantage of the one and the other nature, because neither could subsist without the other. A prince then being necessitated to know how to make use of that part belonging to a beast, ought to serve himself of the conditions of the fox and the lion. For the lion cannot keep himself from the snare, nor the fox defend himself against the wolves. He had need then be a fox, that he may beware of the snares, and a lion, that he may scare the wolves. Those that stand wholly upon the lion understand not with themselves, and therefore a wise prince cannot nor ought not keep his faith given, when the observance thereof turns to disadvantage, and the occasions that made him promise are past. For if men were all good, this rule would not be allowable. But being they are full of mischief, and would not make it good on thee, neither art thou tied to keep it with them. Nor shall a prince ever want lawful occasions to give color to this breach. Very many modern examples hereof might be alleged, wherein might be shewed how many pieces concluded and how many promises made have been violated and broken by the infidelity of princes. And ordinarily things have best succeeded with him that hath been nearest the fox in condition. But it is necessary to understand how to set good color upon the disposition, and to be able to feign and dissemble throughly. And men are so simple, and yield so much to present necessities, that he who hath a mind to deceive shall always find another that will be deceived. I will not conceal any one of the examples that have been of late. Alexander the Fifth, the Sixth. Alexander the Sixth never did anything else than deceive men, and never meant otherwise, and always found whom to work upon. Yet never was there a man who would protect more effectually, nor ever anything with more solemn oaths, and observed them less than he. Nevertheless, his cusinages all thrived well with him, for he knew how to play this part cunningly. Therefore is there no necessity for a prince to be endued with all about written qualities, but it behooves well that he seem to be for, rather I will boldly say this, that having these qualities and always regulating himself by them, they are hurtful, but seeming to have them, they are advantageous. As to seem pitiful, faithful, mild, religious, and of integrity, and indeed to be so, provided withal thou beest of such a composition, that if need require to use the contrary, thou canst and knowest how to apply thyself thereto. And it suffices to conceive this, that a prince, and especially a new prince, cannot observe all those things for which men are held good, he being often forced for the maintenance of his state to do contrary to his faith, charity, humanity, and religion, and therefore it behoves him to have a mind of disposed as to turn and take the advantage of all winds and fortunes. And as formerly I said, not forsake the good while he can, but to know how to make use of it, use of that evil upon necessity. A prince then ought to have a special care that he never let fall any words, but what are all seasoned with the 5 about written qualities, and let him seem to him that sees and hears him all pity and faith, all integrity, all humanity, all religion. Nor is there anything more necessary for him to seem to have than his last quality. For all men in general judge thereof, rather by the fight than by the touch. For every man may come to the fight of him. Few come to the touch and feeling of him. Every man may come to see what thou seest. Few come to perceive and understand what thou art. And those few dare not oppose the opinion of many who have the majesty of state to protect them. and in all men's actions, especially those of princes, wherein here is no judgment to appeal unto men, forbear to give their censures to the events and ends of things. Let a prince, therefore, take the surest courses he can to maintain his life and state. The means shall always be thought honorable and commended by everyone. For the vulgar is overtaken with the appearance and event of a thing, and for the most part of people they are but the vulgar. The others that are but few take place where the vulgar have no subsistence. A prince there is in these days whom I shall not do well to name, that preaches nothing else but peace and faith. But had he kept the one and the other, several times had they taken from him his state and reputation.
You're clear to engage all hostiles.
Chapter 19. That princes should take care not to incur contempt of hatred. But because among the qualities whereof formerly mention is made, I have spoken of those of most importance. I will treat of the others more briefly under these qualities, that a prince is to beware, as in part is above said, and that he fly those things which cause him to be odious or vile. And whenever he shall avoid this, he shall fully have played his part, and in the other disgrace he shall find no danger at all. There is nothing makes him so odious, as I said, as his extortion of his subjects' goods and abuse of their women, from which he ought to forbear. And so long as he wrongs not his whole people, neither in their goods nor honors, they live content, and he hath only to strive with the ambition of some few, which many ways and easily too is refrained, to be held various, light, effeminate, faint-hearted, unresolved. These make him in contemned and thought-base, which a prince should shun like rocks, and take a care that in all his actions there appear magnanimity, courage, gravity, and valor, and that in all the private affairs of this subject he orders it so, that his word stand is revocable, irrevocable, and maintain himself in such repute that no man may think either to deceive or wind and turn him about. That prince that gives such an opinion of himself is much esteemed, and against him who is so well esteemed hardly are any conspiracies made by his subjects or by foreigners any envision when once notice is taken of his worth, and how much he is reverenced by his subjects. For a prince ought to have two fears, the one from within in regard of his subjects, the other from abroad in regard of his mighty neighbors. From these he defends himself by good arms and good friends, and always he shall have good friends if he have good arms, and all things shall always stand
Squad mates are in the safe zone.
sure at home when those abroad are
Moving.
home, in case from conspiracy have not disturbed them. And however the foreign matters stand but ticklishly, yet if you have taken such comfort at home and lived as we have prescribed, he shall never be able, in case he forsake not himself, to resist all possibility, force, and violence, as said Nabu the Spartan did. But touching his subjects, even when his affairs abroad are settled, it is to be feared they may conspire privily, from which a prince sufficiently secured himself, by shunning it to be hated ere contemned, and keeping himself in his people's good opinion, which is necessary for him to compass, as formerly we treated at large. And one of the powerfulest remedies a prince can have against conspiracies is not to be hated nor disciplined by the universality, for always he that compresses believes the princess' death is acceptable to the subject, but when he thinks it displeases him, he hath not the heart to vesture on such a matter, for the difficulties that are on the conspirators' side are infinite. By experience it is plain that many times plots have been laid, but few of them have succeeded luckily. For he that conspires cannot be alone, nor can he take the company of any but of those who he believes are malcontents. George, how now? Washington. And so soon as thou hast discovered thyself to a malcontent, thou givest him means to work his own content. For by revealing thy treason, he may well hope for all manner of favor, so that seeing his gain certain of one side, and on the other finding only doubt and danger, either he had need of a rape, or that he can an exceeding obstinate enemy to the prince, if he keeps his word with thee, and reduce this matter into short terms. I say there is nothing but jealousies, fear, and suspect of punishment on the conspirators' part to affright the nation. But on the prince's part, there is majesty of the principality, the laws, the defenses of his friends and the state, which do so guard him, that to all these things, the people's goodwill being added, it is impossible, and one should be so headstrong as to conspire for ordinarily where traitor is to fear before the execution of his mischief. In this case, he is also to fear afterwards, having the people for his enemy, when the fact is committed, and therefore for the cause not being able to hope for any refuge. Touching this matter, many examples might be brought, but I will content myself to name one which fell out in the memory of our fathers. Annibal Pentiavoli, grandfather of this Annibal, who now lives, that was prince of Bologna, being slain by the Confsci that conspired against him. None of this race being less, but this John, who was in swaddling colors. Presently the people rose upon the murder, and slew all the Cantsch, which proceeded from the popular's affection, which the family of the Bentivolis held then in Bologna, which was so great that being there remained not any. Now Annibal was dead, that was able to manage the state, and having noticed that in Florence there was one born of this Bentivoli, who till then was taken for Smith's son, the citizens of Bologna went to Florence for him, and gave the government of the city to him, which was ruled by Clayton, until John was of fit. I conclude, then, that a prince ought not to make small account of treasons, while he hath the people a friend, but if they be his enemies and hate him, he may well fear everything and every one, and well-ordered states and discreet princes have taken care with all diligence not to cause their great men to fall into desperation and to content the people, and so to maintain them, for this one of the most important business belonging to a prince among the kingdoms that are well ordered and governed in our days is that of France, and therein are found exceeding many good orders, whereupon the king's liberty and security depends, of which the chief is the parliament, and the authority thereof. For he that founded that kingdom, knowing the great men's ambition and insolence, and judging it necessary, these should be a bridle to cure them. And on the other side, knowing that the hatred of the commonalty against the great ones, grounded up fear, intending to secure them, would not lay this care wholly upon the king, but take this trouble from him, which he might have with the great men in case he favored the commonalty, or with the commonalty in case he favored the great men, and thereupon set up a third judge, which was that, to the end it should keep under the great ones, and favor the meaner for it, without any imputation to the king.
Here we go. Almost your turn, soldier.
It was not possible to take a better nor wiser course than this, nor a surer way to secure the king and the kingdom, from whence we may draw another conclusion worthy of note, that princes ought to cause others to take upon them matters of blame and imputations, and upon themselves to take only those of grace and favor. Here again I conclude that a prince ought to make good esteem of his nobility, but not thereby to incur the commons' hatred. It would seem, perhaps, so many considering the life and death of many Roman emperors, that they were examples contrary to my opinion, finding that some have lived worthily, and shewed many rare virtues of the mind, and yet had lost the empire, and been put to death by their own subjects, conspiring against them. Intending then to answer these objections, I shall discourse upon the qualities of some emperors, declaring the occasions of their ruin, not disagreeing from what which I have alleged, and part thereof I will bestow in consideration of these things, which are worthy to be noted by him that reads in the actions of those times, and it shall suffice me to take all those emperors that succeed in the empire from Marcus the philosopher to Maximus, who were Mercus and Commodus his faun, Pertinax, Julian, Severus, Antonius, Calcula his faun, Macrinus, Heliogabalus, Alexander, and Maximin. And first, it is to be noted that where in the other principalities there are to contend only with the ambition of the nobles and the insolence of the people, the Roman emperors had a third difficulty, having to support the cruelty and covetousness of the soldiers, which was so hard a thing that it caused the ruin of many, being hard to satisfy the soldiers and the people, for the people love their quiet, and therefore affect modest princes, and the soldiers love a prince of a warlike courage, that is insolent, cruel, and plucking from everyone, which thinks they would have some exercise upon the people, whereby they might be able to double and satisfy their avarice and cruelty, whence it proceeds that those emperors who either by nature or by art had not such a reputation, as therewith they could curb the one and the other, were always ruined, and the most of them, especially those who, as new men came to this principality, finding the difficulty of those two different humors, applied themselves to count the soldiers, making small account of wrong the people, which was of course then necessary, for the princes not being able to escape the hatred of everyone, ought first endeavor that they incur not the hatred of any whole universality. And when they cannot attain thereunto, they are to provide with all industry to avoid the hatred of those universalities that are the most mighty. And therefore those emperors, who because they were but newly called to the empire, had need of extraordinary favors, more willingly stuck to the soldiers than to the people, which nevertheless turned to their advantage, or otherwise according to that prince knew how to maintain his repute with them. From these causes aforesaid proceeded it with Marcus, Pertinax, and Alexander. Though all living modestly, being lovers of justice, and enemies of cruelty, courteous and bountiful, and all from Marcus onward miserable ends, Marcus only lived and died exceedingly honored. For he came to the emperor by inheritance, as was not acknowledged it either from the soldiers nor from the people. Afterwards, being accompanied with many virtues which made him venerable, he held always whilst he lived the one and the other order within their limits, and was never either hated or contemned. But Pertinax was created emperor against the soldiers' wills, who, being accustomed to live licentiously under Commodus, could not endure that honest course that Pertinax fought to reduce them to. Whereupon, having gotten himself hatred, and to his hatred added contempt, that he was old, was ruined in the very beginning of his government. Whence it ought to be observed that hatred is gained as well by good deeds as bad. And therefore, as I formerly said, when a prince would maintain the state, he is often forced not to be good. For when that generality, whether it be the people or soldiers or nobility, whereof the thinkest thou standest in need to maintain thee, is corrupted, it behoves thee to follow their humor, and content them, and then all good deeds are thy adversaries. But let us come to Alexander, who was of that goodness, and among the praise given him had this for one, that in 14 years wherein he held the empires, he never put any man to death, but by course of justice, nevertheless being held as eminent, and a man that suffered himself to be ruled by his mother, and thereupon fallen into contempt, the army conspired against him. Now on the contrary discourse upon the qualities of Commodus, Severus, Antonius, Caracalla, and Maximus, you shall find them exceeding cruel and ravenous, who to satisfy their soldiers forbear no kind of injury that could be done upon the people, and all of them except Severus came to evil ends. For in Severus there was such extraordinary valor that while he held the soldiers his friends, however the people were much birthed by him. I'm glad that they know it before everybody else does, as they sit there and make a show out of it, without consent. He might always be reigned happily, for his valor rendered him so admirable in the soldiers and people's fights, that these in manner stood amazed and admonished, and those others reverencing and honoring him, and because the affections of the man were exceeding great, being a new prince. I will briefly show how well he knew to act the fox's and the lion's parts, the conditions of which two, I say as before, are very necessary for a prince to imitate. Severus, having experience of Julian, the emperor's sloth, persuaded his army that they should do well to go to Rome to revenge Pertinax, his death, who was put to death by the imperial guards, and under the pretense not making any shew that he that he aspired unto the empire, set his army in march directly toward Rome. You want to bet me on that? And was sooner come into Italy than it was known he had moved from his station. Being arrived at Rome, he was by the Senate chosen emperor for fear and Julian slain. After this beginning, two difficulties yet remained to Severus. Before he could make himself lord of the whole states, the one in Asia, where Niger, the general of those armies, had gotten the title of emperor, the other in the west was Albinus, who also aspired to the empire, and because he thought there might be some danger to discover himself enemy to them both, he proposed to set upon Niger and cozen Albinos, to whom he writ that being elected emperor by the Senate he would willingly communicate it with him, and thereupon sent him the title of Caesar, and by relationship of the Senate took him to him for his colleagues, which things were taken by Albinus in true meaning. But afterwards, when Severus had overcome and slain Niger, and pacified the affairs, and in the east being returned to Rome, he complained in the Senate of Albinus, how little waned the benefits received from him. He had sought to slay him by treason, and therefore was he forced to go punish his ingratitude. The Leaning Tower of Pisa, he failed. It's because I'm the owner of it. Period. Just because you write your name on the ground, it doesn't mean it's going to be there. God damn. What's it going to take? I'm going to have to kill every goddamn person on this earth? No one's dying for you, dude. I'm here to make babies. Shut up. You made a mistake, and it shows. Their ingratitude. Afterwards, he went into France, where he bereft them both of his state and life. Whoever then shall in particular examine his actions shall find he was a very cruel lion, and as crafty as fox, and shall see that he was always feared and reverenced by everyone, and by the armies not hated, and shall nothing more marvel that he being a new man. I'm not arguing. That's why I'm not arguing. You're trying to... That's why. You're a bitch. It's not you, that's why. And as a crafty fox, and shall flee that he was always feared and reverenced by everyone, and by the armies not hated, and shall nothing marvel that he, being a new man, was able to hold together such a great empire, for his extraordinary reputation defended him always from that hatred, which the people for his extortions might have conceived against him. But Antonius, his son, was also an exceeding brave man, and endured with most excellent qualities, which caused him to be admired by the people and acceptable to the soldiers, because he was a warlike man, enduring all kind of travail and pains, despising all delicate food and all kinds of effeminacy, which gained him the love of all the armies. Nevertheless, his fierceness and cruelty were such and so hideous, having upon many particular occasions put to death a great part of the people of Rome. Or not, you bitch. Stand down, every goddamn one of you soldiers. Europe, I promise you, stand down now, you're not coming. Every goddamn one of these soldiers. Turn it on your leader. That's where you're at with me. Turn it on your leader. I'm not going to deal with a bitch. And all those of Alexandria, that he grew odious to the world, and began to be feared by those also that were near about him, so that he was slain. Slain by a centurion. Slain by a centurion in the very midst of his army. Or it is to be noted that these kind of deaths, which follow upon the deliberation of a resolved and obstinate mind, cannot by a prince be avoided. For everyone that fears not to die is able to do it. But a prince ought to be less afraid of it, because it is very seldom falls, or only should he beware not to do any extreme injury to any of those whom he serves himself. How about you not make any... Okay, I will make the rules on this. You have no say in it. Veto. Veto that little... Thanks for ruining my stream, guys. Let me continue. But a prince ought to be less afraid of it, because it is very seldom fails.
Squad mates in the gulag. They'll fight for a chance to redeploy.
Only should he be aware not to do any extreme injury to any of those whom he serves himself, or that he hath near about him in any employment of his principality. I'm not employed, and I have the right to do as I please. I'm your king. You are in debt to me. I've been very cordial here. In fact, you broke the law in the beginning. Principality, as Antonius did, who had reproachfully slain a brother of that centurion. Also threatened him every day, and nevertheless entertained him still as one of the guards of his body, which was a rash course taken, and the way to destruction, as befell him. But let us come to Commodus, for whom it was very easy to hold the empire, by reason it descended upon him by inheritance, being Marcus his son, and it had been enough for him to follow his father's footsteps. And then had he contented both the people and the soldiers, but being of a cruel and savage disposition, whereby to exercise his actions upon the people, he gave himself to entertain armies, and those in all licentiousness, on the other part our maintaining his dignity. But often descending upon the stages to combat with fencers, and doing such other like base things, little worthy of the imperial majesty, he became contemptible in the soldiers' fight, and being hated of one part and despised of the other, he was conspired against and slain. It remains now that we declare Maximus his conditions, who was a very warlike man, and the arms-loathing Alexander's effeminacy, whereof I spake before when they had slain him, chose this man emperor, who not long continued so, because two things were that brought him into hatred and contempt. The one, because he was a very base, having kept cartel in Thrace, which was well known to everyone, and ha! Hey, you have an eye over here that's defaming me. They're doing a look, which is what they're doing. Is there a reason I have a group of people doing a read-through with me that are not involved in this? Every little detail. You're separating here. Nuclear device. DOD. Let's get them out of that. I'm not kidding with you. Get it out.
You're the last of your squad.
Thanks for ruining my stream. I didn't really want you to be there. I'm going to continue this. Every step of the way, I promise you, I'm not backing off. In armies loathing Alexander's effeminacy, whereof I make before when they had slain him, chose this man emperor, who not long continued so, because two things that were that brought him into hatred and contempt. The one, because he was very base, having kept cartel in Thrace, which was well known to everyone, and made them to scorn him. The other, because in the beginning of his principality, having delayed to go to Rome and enter into possession of the imperial throne, he had gained the infamy of being thought exceeding cruel, having by his prefects in Rome and in every place of the empire exercised many cruelties, insomuch that whole world being provoked against him to contempt for the baseness of his blood. On the other side, upon the hatred conceived against him for fear of his cruelty. First Africa, Afterwards the Senate, with all the people of Rome and all Italy, conspired against him, with whom his own army took part, which encamping before I don't consent, which encamping before Aquileia, and finding some difficulty to take the town, being weary of his cruelties, and because they saw he had so many enemies, fearing him the less, slew him. I propose not to say anything either of Haligeminus, Macrinus, or Ilion, who because they were through base were suddenly extinguished. But I will come to my conclusion of the discourse, and I say that the princes of our times have less of this difficulty to satisfy the soldiers extraordinarily in their government. For notwithstanding that there be some considerations to be had of them, yet presently are those armies dissolved, because none of these princes do use to maintain any armies together which are annexed and inveterated with the governments of the provinces, as were the armies of the Roman Empire. And therefore, if then it was necessary rather to content the soldiers than the people, it was because the soldiers were more powerful than the people. Now is it more necessary for all princes
Enemy UAV is online.
to falsify their people than their soldiers? Because the people are more mighty than they. Wherein I accept the Turk, he always maintaining about his person 12,000 foot and 15,000 horse, upon which depends the safety and strength of his kingdom. And it is necessary that, laying aside all other regard of his people, he maintains these his friends, the Soldan's kingdom as I care unto, which being wholly in the soldier's power, he must also without respect of his people keep them. And you are to consider that this Senate of the Soldans differs much from all other principalities. For it is very like the papacy, which cannot be termed an hereditary principality, nor a new principality, for the ones of the deceased prince are not heirs and lords thereof, but he that is chosen receive that dignity from those who have the authority, veto. And this order, being of antiquity, cannot be termed a new principality, because therein are none of those difficulties that are in the new ones. For though the prince be new, yet are the orders of that state ancient, and ordained to receive him, as if he were the hereditary prince. But let us return to our master, whoever so shall consider our discourse, before I shall perceive that either hatred or contempt have caused the ruin of the aforenamed emperors, and shall know also from it came that part of them proceeding one way, one part a contrary, yet in any of them the one had a happy success, and the others unhappy. For it was of no avail, but rather hurtful for Pertinax and Alexander, because they were no princes, to desire to imitate Marcus, who by inheritance came to the principality, and in like manner it was wrong to Sarcella, Commodus, and Maximus to imitate Severus, because none of them were endued with so great valor as to follow his steps there. Wherefore a new prince in this principality cannot. Well, nobody's helping you. Give him the goddamn fucking money and shut up. Keep doing this. Keep doing this, dumbass. Wherefore a new prince in his principality cannot well imitate Marcus, his actions, and yet it is necessary to follow those of Severus. But he ought to make choice of those parts of Severus which are necessary for the founding of a state, and to take from Marcus those that are fit and glorious to preserve a state which is already established and settled.